God called Abram. God spoke directly to Abram. He instructed Abram to leave his home. Abram's home was a familiar place, full of comforting memories. It was where he spent his childhood, surrounded by familiar sights and sounds. He grew up there, playing in the streets and fields. He knew every corner of his village. He had spent countless hours exploring the surrounding countryside. He knew the winding streets and the cozy houses intimately. He knew the friendly faces of his neighbors. He knew their stories, their joys, and their sorrows. He shared their laughter and their tears. He felt comfortable and secure in his home. He felt safe and protected within its walls. His home represented everything he knew and loved. It was his sanctuary, his refuge from the world. But God told Abram to leave all of this behind. God told Abram to leave the comfort and security of his home, the place where he felt most safe. He told Abram to journey to a new land, a land Abram did not know, a land far away from everything familiar, a land with different people, different customs, and a different way of life. This was a significant change for Abram, a very big and daunting change. Imagine leaving everything you know and love. Imagine leaving your family and friends, the people who are closest to you. Imagine leaving the comfort of your home, the place where you feel most secure. Imagine going to a place you've never been before, a place with strange sights and unfamiliar sounds, a place where you know no one, a place where you are a stranger in a strange land. It was a daunting task for Abram. It was a scary thought. He must have felt overwhelmed by the enormity of the task before him. But God promised Abram this new land. He promised Abram a new home in this unfamiliar place. He promised Abram many children, many descendants who would carry on his name, a family that would grow and flourish in this new land. Abram was old. He and his wife Sarai had no children. They had longed for a child for many years. They had prayed for a child, but they had not been blessed with a child. This promise from God seemed impossible. How could they have children at their advanced age? How could they start a new family in a new and unfamiliar land? It seemed like a dream, a fantasy beyond their reach. Yet Abram listened to God's call. He obeyed God's command. He trusted God's word, even though it seemed impossible. He left his family and the comfort of his home. He started a long and arduous journey, a journey to the unknown, a journey filled with uncertainty and challenges. This journey was a test of Abram's faith, a test of his trust in God. Would Abram continue to trust God even when things were difficult and uncertain? Would he continue to believe God's promise even when it seemed impossible to fulfill? Abram's story is similar to other stories in the Bible, stories where God calls people to follow him, calls them to do difficult things, things that seem impossible to achieve, things that require great faith and unwavering courage. Abram trusted God completely. He believed God's promise, even when it seemed impossible. He held on to that promise tightly. He kept it in his heart as a source of strength and hope. It was a beacon of light guiding him through the darkness. Abram's faith serves as an example for us today, an example of what it means to trust God completely, even in the face of adversity. God made a promise to Abram, a very special and significant promise, a covenant, a sacred agreement between God and Abram, a bond that would last forever. This covenant was not just a simple promise, it was a solemn oath, a binding agreement between God and Abram. God promised Abram land, a new land for him and his descendants to call their own, a land where they could live and thrive, building homes and raising families, a land of promise and opportunity, a land flowing with milk and honey. God promised Abram a family, a large and prosperous family, as numerous as the stars in the sky, a family that would carry on his name and legacy, a family that would be blessed by God for generations to come, a family that would spread God's word throughout the world. God promised Abram blessings. Blessings not just for him and his family, but blessings for everyone. All the nations of the earth would be blessed through Abram. Blessings of peace and prosperity, blessings of hope and healing would flow through Abram to the world. This promise was a special agreement between God and Abram. Like a promise between two close friends, but even more profound and enduring. A promise between God and humanity. A promise that would last forever. God promised to bless Abram abundantly. Abram, in turn, would be a blessing to others, a source of hope and inspiration for all who knew him. He would be a light shining in the darkness, a beacon of hope for a lost world. This promise is incredibly important. Important for people throughout history and even today. It is the foundation of many faiths and beliefs. It demonstrates God's unwavering love and faithfulness. God's plan for the world is revealed through this promise. It shows that God cares deeply for his people. It shows that God always keeps his promises, no matter how long it takes. His promises are eternal, unchanging, and unwavering. This promise to Abram continues to resonate today. It continues to impact people's lives in profound ways. It reminds us that God is always faithful and true. It reminds us that God has a plan for each of our lives, even when we cannot see it. Abram's journey was long and arduous. It was filled with difficulties and challenges. He faced many problems along the way. He faced unfamiliar terrain, navigating through mountains and valleys, deserts and plains. He faced harsh weather conditions, enduring scorching heat and bitter cold. He faced hunger and thirst, sometimes going without food or water for days. He worried about where his next meal would come from. He traveled to a new land, a land he didn't know, filled with uncertainty and danger. He faced fear and anxiety, not knowing what the future held. What would happen to him and his family in this unfamiliar place? Would he find food and water to sustain them? Would he be safe from harm? These questions must have weighed heavily on his mind. He journeyed to Egypt because of a severe famine. There was no food in the land where he was living. The crops had failed, and the animals were dying. He was worried and scared. What would he do? How would he survive and provide for his family? He felt the weight of responsibility for his family's well-being. He made a mistake in Egypt. He told people that his wife, Sarai, was his sister. He was afraid for his life. He thought people would harm him if they knew Sarai was his wife. They might try to take her from him or even kill him. This was a moment of weakness for Abram, a moment of fear and desperation. He allowed fear to overcome his faith in God. But even in his mistake, God intervened to help Abram. God protected Sarai from harm. God showed his power and his unwavering love for Abram and Sarai. He kept his promise to protect them. Abram learned a valuable lesson from this experience. He learned to trust God more completely, even in difficult and uncertain times. Even when he made mistakes, he learned that God was always there for him. He learned that God is faithful and true. God is always present, even when we fail. Even when we are afraid, God is there to protect and guide us. Abram built altars to God throughout his journey. He worshiped God with a grateful heart. He gave thanks to God for his provision and protection. He acknowledged God's presence in his life. He recognized God's power and authority. He knew that God was the source of all his blessings. He knew that God was with him, guiding and protecting him every step of the way. He knew that God was directing his path. He traveled to different places, always seeking God's guidance. He moved his tent as God directed him. He listened attentively to God's voice. He trusted God's direction implicitly. God remained faithful to his promise to Abram. He blessed Abram abundantly. Abram's story teaches us valuable lessons about faith and trust. It teaches us about trusting God completely, even when things are hard and we don't understand. Even when we are afraid and uncertain, we can trust in God's unwavering love and care. It teaches us about God's promises. God is always faithful to his promises. His commitment is unwavering and steadfast. God always keeps his promises, and we can trust in his word completely. It teaches us about following God, even when it's hard and challenging. Even when we are afraid, we can find courage and strength in following God's path for our lives. Following God requires courage and faith, but it is always worth it. Abram's story is incredibly important for people today. It is a timeless story of faith and trust. A story of God's unwavering love and faithfulness. A story that reminds us that God is always with us, even in the darkest of times. A story that continues to inspire and guide us on our own journeys of faith. A story that continues to give hope and encouragement to all who hear it. Before time was measured, a story began. Sacred Narratives brings that story to life. And what you hear today is only a fragment. Unlock the full experience on Spotify, audiobooks.com, Everand, Rakuten Kobo, B and N Audiobooks, TuneIn, Baker and Taylor, Bibliotheca, Overdrive, and the Sacred Narrative app. The full journey is waiting. Please like and subscribe.